And we are live. Welcome to everyone who's watching to this live stream where we as Utopian Labs are going to launch something awesome. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Steven. I'm one of the founders of Utopian Labs. And with Utopian Labs, we are an AI research lab. And not just an AI research lab, because we are specializing in sales. This means that we are building agents, AI agents and AI models that can do very, very, very well in sales. And we don't want to replace your sales teams like a lot of people out there. We want to give your sales team superpowers because we are a big fan of the combination of AI agents, AI models, and of course, the people in the sales team. And in order to do that, we need mass adoption. That's the thing that we're looking for. But there's three things that we personally believe that are currently in the way of that mass adoption of AI in sales. One of them, very important, is usability. Usability meaning the way that you interact with this AI. Currently, there's a lot of AI out there, but it's all either in ChatGPT or it's locked behind some SaaS tool where you can trigger LLMs with the clicks of a button. But we don't really call this mass adoption of AI. We call this like sprinkling AI somewhere where you can. The second thing, also very important, is trust. General models, like general purpose models, the big AI models that are out there right now, they're hallucinating a lot, which makes it very difficult to use them at scale. Imagine sending an email to someone stating a fact that didn't happen or something that doesn't exist, which is, of course, something that you do not want to happen. And the last one is costs. Cost, basically running AI at scale is very, very expensive at this moment. And these are the things that we as Utopian Labs want to solve. This is our mission. And we're doing that by focusing on hyper-specialized models. So you have the general purpose models out there. Those are like the models that you know, right? This GPT or Claude or Gemini. These are the models that you can basically ask to do anything. You can ask them to write Python code, or you can ask them to write a poem for you, or maybe some Italian recipes. And you can also ask them to write a sales email. But these models are basically a jack of all trades. And because they're that, they're a master of none. There's nothing that they're really, really, really good at. Whereas if you look at hyper-specialized models, much smaller models that are trained to do one thing very well, and if you have a combination of those models working together seamlessly, we believe that that is the future, and that's the way to make the adoption of AI faster, solve the problems that we mentioned, and basically make it better, faster, and cheaper. Without further ado, as I said, we're going to launch something awesome today. And to make that happen, to do the launch, I want to ask Robin. He is our CTO and co-founder at Utopian Labs to do the honors and tell you what we're going to be talking about today.
Awesome. Thank you, Steven. Thank you. So just like Steven just explained, we really believe in specializing models in one's very specific task in order to make it super, super, super good at something, especially in the sales area where we specialize in. And today we are launching the first hyper-specialized model in a series of hyper-specialized models called Cold Email 1. So Cold Email 1 is, like the name says, a model that is super specialized in writing cold emails. And it took a lot of effort to get this model to the state and to the quality where it is right now. But we're really proud of the result. So really happy to show that today. And before we go into very specific benchmarks, as you can see, the overall quality and score of Cold Email 1 is a lot better than any other model out there. As you can see here, we're comparing it to the most expensive and biggest models in the world. And yet, Cold Email 1 is head and shoulders above everything else in terms of cold email writing. We're going to look into how this overall score is constructed. But before we before we do that, I just want to make sure you know that all of these models are basically getting the exact same input. So they're all getting the exact same system prompt. We explain nicely how to write a nice cold email, and they're all getting the exact same research and sender and receiver information. So what is this overall score comprised of? Let's go into the first two metrics. On the left-hand side, you see readability, which is super important for a cold email. If you receive an email from a stranger, someone that you don't know, then you only have a few seconds to get their attention. And if you have an email that is hardly readable, basically super hard to read, then you're not going to grab their attention. So it's important to make emails super easy to read, very simple language, lots of white space. And therefore, these two metrics, both readability and white space on the right-hand side, matter a lot. And as you can see, other models struggle especially with readability a lot. And even though they got the instruction to write with short sentences, easy words, etc., they're generally also used and trained to write, for example, papers and everything like that, which is not very handy for cold email. It actually hurts instead of helps. The next two scores, and we're going to go into some of the scores, we're going to dive deeper into how they're measured in a bit. The next two scores are relevance and recipient focus. So relevance is basically, we measure how, let's imagine a scenario where you kind of send the same email to 1,000 people at the same time. That is basically a pitch lab, right? You don't know anything about that person in that instance, and you just send the same thing to everybody. But we want to make sure that every email that someone receives is super, super relevant for that person, and it makes sense for that person to read. They understand what you're talking about, and that you connect it to their world. On the right-hand side, actually, we have recipient focus, which is basically kind of the percentage of the email that is about them instead of about you. And imagine if you receive a cold email and that person is only talking about themselves and pitching. Nobody really cares about other people, right? Especially about strangers. Like they only want to care about themselves and like what is in it for them. Funny enough, even though Cold Email 1 is the best model out there for recipient focus, we actually didn't train on that at all. We actually mostly trained on relevance, and recipient focus is something that came out of that. So last two metrics that I want to dive into. CTA score on the left-hand side. There are actually pretty clear best practices about a CTA, which is a call to action of the cold email. So that is the question or statement that you have in the end that prompts the other person to respond or do something, right? And one thing that is best practice is basically asking a question that you can answer with yes or no. Because let's imagine you receive a cold email from someone, you don't know that person, you don't really want to spend like 15 minutes writing a reply, right? You don't really care. So all you really want to do at most is to say sure or yes. That's all you really want to do. That's one thing. The second best practice generally is to not ask for a meeting. So many people do this, but this is the exact same as just walking into a bar, seeing the first girl that you see and just asking her to marry you. That's the exact same thing. Nobody wants to do that. It's way too much commitment. If someone doesn't know you and doesn't know how you can help them, they're not going to meet with you. They're not going to spend their precious time with you in general. Of course, if you do instruct the model to ask for a meeting, it will do that. But we want to have good defaults, right? And therefore we do this. The third best practice is to have one question in the email at the very end, because otherwise it's not clear to what question the recipient should answer. And so as you can see, we score a score of 1, which means that the CTA is always good and always best practice. Whereas other models, let's say, they still want to ask you to marry you. On the right-hand side, we have avoiding spam trigger words. This was a difficult one to get out because, and it's also an important one, because some words that you would use in emails actually are triggering spam filters quite quickly, and rightfully so, because some of the words, like for example, free or buy now or urgent or credit card or dollar signs and all of that, these words are generally used by scammers, and therefore it is actually Gmail's and Outlook's job to send that email to spam. And we don't want to use these words at all in our emails because we obviously don't want to go to spam, right? And as you can see, cold email 1 never uses these words. It's a score of 1. It's almost impossible to make it say free, for example, and that's a good thing. So let's go a bit more about the training and validation process. I won't bore you with any math or anything. I'll just go high over. So we trained the model actually in quite a relatively, well, reinforcement learning itself is not new, but the method specifically that I'm going to talk about is relatively new. So we actually didn't give the model like tons of examples, which it basically should copy in order to learn. The model actually learned how to write good cold emails, the best cold email possible by itself. And we specifically used a reinforcement learning technique called GRPO. And this GRPO technique was made famous by a company called DeepSeek, which some of you guys might know. They launched a paper earlier this year when they released their R1 model. And this was trained with that technique, and afterwards it became really famous. How reinforcement learning and specifically GRPO works is that instead of us telling the model how to write, it will get tons and tons of combinations of senders and recipients, fictional senders and recipients. And for every single combination, it writes 8 different emails, and it does its best in order to write the best email possible. So for every single combination, it writes 8 different emails. And then what we do is we tell the model how good or bad that attempt was. And as you can see, we kind of colored some emails green here, some red, which are then less good, and some of them, kind of in the middle. And the idea behind GRPO or reinforcement learning is that the model over time will write more like the green ones and less like the red ones. But there is one problem with our model specifically, or one problem that we faced that DeepSeek didn't face, because DeepSeek actually trained their model in this way in order to be really good at math and at physics and all kinds of questions and answers where there is multiple ways to get to the answer, but there's one right answer. And so it's really easy to say, yes, this was a good response, and no, this was not a good response, because you just check, was the answer correct? In our case, though, is there really a right answer with cold email? It's more of a creative thing, right? So there's there's multiple ways in which you can write a really good cold email. And so that was super difficult, because this is not very well studied how you do GRPO with a domain like this. And therefore, we need to have a new way and find out a new way in order to score these cold emails and to basically tell the model how good their cold email is that they just wrote. And instead of saying you're right or you're wrong, like you would do with a math question, we actually came up with multiple scores, as you can see here, 10, that we included in the training process. So we scored it on readability, like we just talked about, but also word count. Super long emails, generally, if you don't know if you write an email to someone you don't know, they're not going to spend 15 minutes reading your email. White space, lots of white space makes the email easier to read as well. CTA quality is the thing that we just talked about, right? Correct sign-off means that you sign off with the right name. Sometimes, LLMs might hallucinate a name if a name is not there. Coherence means, having a nice and logical flow throughout the email. That's important too, of course. Hallucinations, that's quite clear, right? We don't want the model to hallucinate and make things up in order to make it sound more relevant, for example. Spam trigger avoidance we just covered, but also it should follow your instructions and it should be the most relevant email possible. So what we did is we gave feedback to the model in all these different kinds of ways. And eventually that's combined into one score, basically, where the model knows whether it's a good email or a bad email. And again, this method, basically GRPO, with all of these different scores, is not very well studied. Usually it's like right, wrong, over like a maximum 2 things that you give the model feedback on, but not 10. So that was hard to get right, but the result was great. So let's go into, I want to go into 2 of these scores that we just talked about to give you a better idea of how we actually measured it. Number 1 is readability. For readability, we actually used quite a famous formula called the flash reading ease. And the flash reading ease just simply is a number that says how hard or easy a piece of text is to read. And as you can see here on the bottom, you have the formula. And the formula penalizes a model if they use more words in a sentence or more syllables per word, right? So just longer words or longer sentences. It's quite simple, but it's pretty powerful. So let's actually go into some examples. We have a sentence here, which is a pretty easy to read sentence, right? We started the project last week and hope to finish it soon. And this gets a score of 88.91, which is 6th grade level, which means almost anyone can read it, conversational English. But if we say it in a different way, this sentence has the exact same meaning, but I'm not even going to attempt to read it because it gets a score of -10, which is basically above university level. You need to have a university degree in order to really easily be able to read this. And so again, if you send a cold email to someone, you want to be more like the first one and not like the second one, because they're not going to read. They're not even going to try, basically. And as you can see, cold email 1 almost maxes out this metric. And it writes emails that are really easily understandable by anyone. Whereas, for example, Claude 3.7 Sonnet, which is one of the best models out there, it's, even though we instruct it to write really easy words and short sentences, it still outputs things that are college level difficulty. So these models, they find it really hard to make things simple and to boil things down to very simple language, which Cold Email 1 is excellent at. The second one is relevance. So relevance is measured very differently than readability, because it's just readability you can calculate with code, right? Syllables and sentences. How relevant an email is to someone is hard to calculate. So what we did is that we actually made an LLM check all examples that our model wrote, and made it score how relevant that email was for the recipient. But of course, also this is quite hard to get stable. We don't want the LLM to guess wrong or like say its own opinion. We want the email to be relevant overall. And therefore, what we did is we made a 15-point checklist that the LLM goes over and says either yes, no to all of these different points. And in the end, based on how many points an email gets out of 15, that's the score. As you can see, Cold Email 1 also produces state-of-the-art relevance, which was really hard to get right, because in general, the model, like in order to get more relevance, they want to talk more and give more words. But what is super hard is to make an email very relevant with like very little words. And that's what we got done. But in order to really show you how relevant an email is and what we take into account when measuring relevance, let's cover some examples, because that's basically what we're all here for, right? So on the right-hand side, we have an email that GPT-4o wrote, which is one of OpenAI's flagship models. And on the left-hand side, we have one of the emails that Cold Email 1 wrote. This is an email from a marketing agency, and they reached out to, in this case, a fictional person that is running a local car repair shop in Phoenix. Let's read the one on the right-hand side first. So GPT-4o says, "Hi, Tom. I noticed Phoenix Car Care isn't on the first page for Phoenix Auto Repair. Missing valuable traffic." This is quite a relevant opener because it's something that is relevant to them, right? It's about them as well. It's not directly a pitch, so that's pretty good. "We specialize in boosting local visibility using SEO and targeted Google Ads to give smaller businesses an edge." So here directly, after saying something quick about them, they go into pitch mode. All about themselves, the second sentence. "Would you be open to a quick call to discuss tailored strategies for your shop?" So here, imagine you're reading 2 sentences for someone that you don't know, and like, in what world would you want to have a call with them at that point already, right? That's not going to work. On top of that, basically the first paragraph, as you can see, is a big paragraph. There's no white space used there, and most of the email is not about the recipient, it's about the sender. On the left-hand side, we have an email that Cold Email 1 wrote. Let's get into it. "Hi, Tom. Notice you're not showing up for Phoenix Auto Repair searches," which is, again, the most relevant opener in this case. "You've been there since 48, but your site isn't ranking when folks look for family-run shops in Phoenix. Still about them. Plus, none of the local shops are using Google Ads. That means a chance to be the go-to team online. Still, no pitching, just only about them, only giving them relevant information that is relevant to them. Can I share a few ideas on how we might get your site a spot on the first page? Eleanor." So this entire email was about the recipient, right? Giving value to the recipient, showing them that they're not ranking, and also letting them know that their competitors are not running any Google Ads, so that's an opportunity for them. And then it asks the Tom, in this case, whether they're interested in receiving some info. I mean, sure, that's interesting, right? They'll say yes to that. The next example. This is addressed to a fictional CRO at a payments company. And this is coming from the sender of this email is a sales consultancy. So they implement sales systems that will get companies to grow faster. Let's read the email on the right-hand side, which is again from GPT-4o. "Hi, Jason. Congrats on your recent successes at PayFlex. At GrowthGrid, we've built systems that let companies like SignSwift to exceed targets rapidly." So the first 7 words are about the recipient. it's like basically quite a vague compliment. What recent successes are you talking about? It's also quite insincere. And then afterwards, it starts pitching straight away. With your new products and a UK expansion, that those few words are relevant, a 97.5% success rate sales operating system could be key. And then it just keeps pitching about their own service in this case, right? And then it asks again for a 15-minute call, which they're probably not going to get a reply to. On the left-hand side, we have cold email 1. Hi, Jason. Saw you're pushing PayFlex into the UK, plus launching built-in. This is such a relevant opener because a sales consultancy service that helps people grow. Jason is basically moving into the UK, a new market, and is launching a new product. That opener is directly relevant to the service that the sender is offering. With your 600% growth track record, skill sets basically in between brackets, which is this last company, I bet you're focused on scaling sales fast for these moves. So this is still about the recipient, right? This is about Jason and how he scaled his last company and how likely he is also thinking about scaling his current company with this new product and new market. And then comes the pitch. We've helped teams like yours hit 120% target in just 13 weeks. So the pitch is short, but it does include already social proof, which shows that, which shows trust they have done this before. Could be very useful for PayFlex's expansion and new product launch. So again, then it switches back to the receiver. Open to exploring how this might fit your playbook, Chris. So this was the second email. Now let's go over the last emails a bit quicker. So on the right-hand side, again, you have GPT-4o. I'm just gonna only read the intro. Imagine you're a 2 sales team person working like a robust force, all thanks to Luna AI. So after this, it basically keeps pitching about Luna. There is no single thing about the receiver anymore afterwards. And then it says free plan, which is also a spam word. On the left-hand side, it's a lot more relevant again. It mentions about that they only have 2 reps. It mentions that they're going to go to basically an event soon. And then it weaves the service basically nicely into the email. Okay, so we see that basically cold email 1 is a lot better at than normal models basically at writing cold emails. But this is what a very good system prompt, right? We basically instruct the models to be to write short sentences, basically make readable emails, make it super relevant, etc. What if we don't tell the models anything? We just say, write a cold email from this person to this person, because this will show us basically how baked in the knowledge is about writing good cold emails into the model. And if we do that, then we see this. On the right-hand side, you have GPT-4o, and GPT-4o basically makes every mistake in the book. So it starts with, I hope this message finds you well, which is like every person who has written 5 cold emails before knows you should not do this. And because it doesn't add any value. And then it writes a super long cold email with very difficult language. Nobody's going to read this. On the left-hand side, of course, with the instructions, cold email 1 would do even better, but it does still adhere to the principles of writing a good cold email. So you can read more about the details about how we actually made this work, about how we got cold email 1 to this quality, because it was quite a journey. And cold email 1, I'm happy to say, is now available for everyone in our R1 copywriting agent, also via API on request. And with that, back to you, Stephen.
Oh man, this is so awesome. As you can imagine, we were really much looking forward to launching this and talking about not only what we launched, but also the process of how we got here. And before we close this off, I wanted to mention a couple of things that we think are very cool and also very important. So as you can see here, we talked about the hyper-specialized models in the beginning. It's like the big overall model is basically the Swiss Army knife, right? That can do everything. But why you buy this very expensive and very a big Swiss Army knife if you only use the screwdriver, right? So we have hyper-specialized models that are very good at one thing. And if you have a combination of those models seamlessly working together, you can give your sales team superpowers. But one of the things that is very important and that is standing in the way of mass adoption in our eyes is the cost of AI. Big models are very expensive to host, they're very expensive to train. And you can get some scale optimization, but you will run out of headroom there soon. which is why we're super excited that the model that is outperforming GPT, that's outperforming Claude, is actually 250 times smaller than the other models out there. That also has consequences for the price, as you can see right here. So as Robin mentioned, R1 copywriting is already available to everyone who is using our R1 copywriting agent, and we slashed our prices by half. So currently it's only 2.5 cents for writing an email. And soon, and upon request, we made the bare individual model called Email One available via API as well, where we only make it 1 cent per email. And probably some of you are currently calculating. It's like, okay, 1 cent per email, that's a pretty arbitrary number. It's very cheap, but what does the rest of the market look like? Like this. So this graph actually shows you the comparison of the costs and the overall score. So as you can see, there are a couple of big models in here. You can see their performance and how they've been scoring on the Utopian Labs, like the cold email benchmarks. And as you can see, Cold Email One is in the upper left corner. So we have the best model that can write the best emails, but also the one that is most affordable. And of course, this is only the beginning, because Cold Email One is the first in a series of hyper specialized models that we're going to be launching. So there's much more coming soon. There's one other thing that I want to mention, is that we very much believe in transparency. Robin has been talking about validation and evaluation. He's been showing you all these benchmarks. And there's one thing that we want to make sure is that you all know that you don't have to believe our words for it. We're not going to show you like one benchmark, which could also be based upon a cherry-picked example, one where Cold Email One got it better than the rest. We trained on hundreds of thousands of examples, and we evaluated on thousands of examples. All kinds of different companies reaching out to each other, different situations, different research reports, and all of that stuff to make sure that not only our model is the best, but it also is consistently the best, because consistency is one very important thing to build trust, and trust is one of the things that is still standing in the way of mass adoption. So what we're doing is we are open sourcing part of our eval data set, basically the data set that we use to build, to create the benchmarks that we showed you during this presentation. And to show you that it's not just cherry-picked examples, we're going to open source part of it in a GitHub repository, so you can check it out, see what kind of data we used. And secondly, we also made the evaluators. So what Robin mentioned, relevance and readability and all of that stuff, available via our API for free. So if you're looking at these numbers and you think, well, there's no way that this could actually be true, go see for yourself, use our API for free, use our open source data, use it with Cold Email One, use it with Claude, with Gemini, and with GPT, and you can see all of the results for yourself. So that's it for now. We're super excited to see what you guys will be building with Cold Email One. We hope you will stay tuned for all of the future hyper specialized models that we will be launching. We'll do it in a similar way like this. And I guess there's only one thing left for me to say. Happy selling.